It's not just because you can do something, you should. That's the reason why software developers should never set up printers for family members. That's not our job, right? This is IT admin stuff. That's not developer stuff. I think that's the core message, that Mogenius is providing a platform. It's basically our external platform team for what we do. And they have proven that even, as I said, even our very specific edge cases were covered. This is what you expect of a platform team, and they have delivered.
So once the Kubernetes cluster is ready, what do I need to do? I need pipelines, I need monitoring, I need access to the cluster, I need to see what's going on, I need status information logging, and we do all that in one out-of-the-box solution. And this makes it especially great for teams that don't have large set of resources, people that provide the tooling and the workflows that you need to deploy successfully to Kubernetes and to run Kubernetes across several development teams.
I have total control over everything, and that was eye-opening. In that moment I knew, okay, now I can deploy stuff and change everything, create multiple pipelines, and use all the things that GitHub pipelines or workflows really excel at. And I know that Mogenius or the cluster is running what I want it to run. That was a great thing.
That's the reason why we go with Kubernetes, because that is a better proven technology no matter what. And there is a ceiling of complexity. It won't get more complex with the scale of your application. While serverless is always as complex as your solution is. And that's an issue. There we are. So, Hello everyone.
Hello.
Hey guys.
And welcome to this nice little morning show. And we came together to talk about a very specific topic, which is why we decided as a startup to go with Kubernetes. On the left-hand side, you see Jonathan, Jan in the middle, founder of Mogenius, and me. Probably know me already. So we were on Docker for basically always, I think, when we started with that one, but never on Kubernetes directly. We have made its decision a while ago, and now we are finally there. And Jan from Mogenius was one of the driving persons with that, because he convinced us with a platform as a service solution they provide. We were already on the platform as a service solution somewhere else, but there were some flaws. So we want to talk about that today, and why we actually made the decision to go with that solution, with Mogenius in this case, because it was so convincing for us. Let's start with introducing with who we actually are here. So Jan, do you want to introduce yourself real quick? So where we have met, what you have actually done, and what your plans are so far.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. My name is Jan. I'm one of the co-founders at Mogenius. We are a company based in Cologne in Germany. We're basically helping companies and software teams to make working with Kubernetes a pleasure and more easy. And so I think we met at a conference. Since then, had a few conversations about your journey from Docker hosting, container hosting to Kubernetes. And yeah, it's a really great pleasure to accompany you during that transition.
Jonathan.
Yeah, my name is Jonathan. I'm the co-founder of Webpa, and I'm primarily the guy for the backend and the infrastructure.
Now, it wasn't always the case that you were doing infrastructure. That's an interesting aspect as well. It was always my job in the past, so I was the only one doing that in our companies. So there's a second company. And now you are doing that. Definitely a good property of Mogenius, I think, that developers can use you, right? So we haven't even thought about that before the show, but we are no ops persons. So we are typical developers with a focus on development, but ops is a topic. So if you don't have a dedicated ops person, which we never had. So we had that in the last company, but there was a different story. It was more the typical sysadmin thing, not the modern cloud ops person. So Docker was always in the hands of the developers. So very much the direction of DevOps. So team was responsible for ops and development. That's definitely something I want to point out, that Mogenius really helps there as a platform as a service solution. Can you give us a little introduction first? What Mogenius actually is, how you can basically just pitch it real quick to the audience. So what is it? Why should you use it?
Yeah. What it does is actually it's a developer platform that you can connect with any Kubernetes cluster. So you can put a great developer experience on top of any Kubernetes, no matter where it runs. It could be a hyperscaler, it could be your own cloud, it could be on-prem or even on your local laptop. And we provide a solution that integrates monitoring, pipelines, navigation through clusters, access management, everything that you need basically to make Kubernetes usable from a developer point of view. So once the Kubernetes cluster is ready, what do I need to do? I need pipelines, I need monitoring, I need access to the cluster, I need to see what's going on, I need status information logging, and we do all that in one out-of-the-box solution. And this makes it especially great for teams that don't have large set of resources, people that provide the tooling and the workflows that you need to deploy successfully to Kubernetes and to run Kubernetes across several development teams. The typical scenario that we see is that companies are leaning towards Kubernetes, they want to use it, they have limited resources to actually manage it successfully for a set of teams, and they use our platform to bridge that gap and to resolve that bottleneck. I think with you, it's probably a similar scenario where you think there's some reason for Kubernetes, why you want to make the move to Kubernetes, but you don't want to hire 3 DevOps people that create the platform, or maybe 1 or 2, but you wanted to remain in the setup that you have today. And I think that's a great success that we've made that possible for you.
Yes. When you hear that, Jonathan, so you were essentially part of that journey. You came from somewhere else, right? So when you have heard that, was that actually the story, like you were experiencing it as well, basically along all the way, because your background is developer, so you are a senior engineer. So was it like this, we don't need the ops persons? Was it like you were feeling safe during that journey with what you were doing?
Yeah, pretty much. Because I know that without Mogenius, we wouldn't have touched Kubernetes at all. It was too complicated and no one had the time to get into it. And we didn't want to invest into another person or 2 if you want to have redundancy in that. So that was really a big step to just have a software and to rely on that and to just know, okay, I have all the information that I need right now. I can see everything. I can deploy stuff and it works, it runs. And if it doesn't, I know why. That was a big step for us.
Can you describe how that actually looked like when, for the specific challenge of deploying a container application, how did that work for you with our platform compared to what you did before? And how was that maybe more complicated or less complicated?
I would like to explain the thing before. We used, I don't want to get into what exactly we used, but it was complicated. We had Docker containers. That was fine, but the pipeline was intransparent. So we knew that an update is running, but we didn't know what is happening right now. How long will it take? What didn't work? Why didn't it really work? And sometimes it would take about 15 minutes to build and deploy and then crash. And we didn't know why. They had a possibility to go with the pipeline, but it didn't change anything in the deployment phase at the end, because I just pushed a deploy on that platform and the platform tried to do it. And if it didn't work, GitHub just said it didn't work and we didn't know why. Or we had timeouts, got the connection broken. In the new platform, it was, at first it was confusing because I tried to do it exactly like the platform is trying to explain it to me. I didn't get it at first, but at some point I realized, okay, I have control over the GitHub pipeline. It's not the platform that has the control. It's just giving me the pipeline template in a way, and I can change it. I have total control over everything. And that was eye-opening. In that moment, I knew, okay, now I can deploy stuff and change everything, create multiple branches or deploy pipelines and use all the things that GitHub pipelines or workflows really excel at. And I know that Mogenius or the cluster is running what I wanted to run. That was a great thing.
No, that's really interesting to see that because I know that the way we look at pipelines is not this full autopilot pipeline, and that's on purpose because it lacks control and you don't have the visibility that you need. So the approach that we have is providing starter templates for GitHub Actions that are integrated with our platform and with our operator that actually runs on the cluster. We provide the baseline components for the pipeline, deploy to your repository, and then it works. But you have much more control and much more visibility, but also more configurations to do. And it's great to see that this worked out for you.
Yeah. And the pipeline starter that you have, I misunderstood it at first because it's just a starter. It can do everything that you think. If you misinterpret it, it still works. You can just use it and use it over and over, but it's not the intention of it. And that I realized later on. And in that moment, it got nice.
Like driving a car in first gear. So it works, but
Yeah, exactly.
Then he came back from car garage and finally everything was fine. No, but observability and control is extremely important. That's one of the reasons why we never went for solutions like Vercel or something like that, the typical magic cloud. So you basically provide a repository and the rest is done for you. That sounds great for someone who is starting something. It is very bad for someone who is responsible for something. And just now we got several emails, ton of emails, because of the NPM outage, the hack which is going on right now. And there are so many people like coming to us and asking us, hey, have you done that? Because clients, enterprise level clients want to have that. They want to take a look into what measurements are you actually doing that this is not passing to any or through any pipeline into your containers. How can you actually manage those kind of things? And this is just one aspect. And the point is that you need to have the control in order to serve those requirements. You simply cannot just hope that the magic cloud or the magic cloud provider is doing that for you. So it is supposed to, but you shouldn't be relying on that, even though it wasn't the case. So we had quite a good control in the last PaaS platform we used or still use for other platforms. What we see on Mogenius is that we can utilize nearly everything what is available in Kubernetes or what we actually need from Kubernetes without ever had the need to be trained in how you set up your Kubernetes yourself or how you actually need to upgrade Kubernetes to the next version. These kind of things are already covered while you can focus and have still the quality of observability and control or controllability. That's something I very much appreciate in that moment. And that's just what I wanted to add accordingly to what you just said.
Did you need to read Kubernetes documentations to get started?
Where are those? Can we get those?
No,
I never looked for it.
Because I know that there's some terms and like pods, namespaces, ingress, how do these things work? So I was wondering.
We adopted those because we started, for the most part of the time, we used Docker Swarm to run Docker containers. And before that, PM2, which was actually not a container solution, but a node scheduler. And we were using for quite a while the terminology of Docker Swarm. So thinking in services, thinking in replicas. And now we adopted the Kubernetes speak a little bit more. Like Jonathan is now all day long talking about pods and not services anymore. That's so there are some differences. In Kubernetes, you theoretically can run inside one service multiple things, right? While in Docker Swarm, you cannot. So you just have one thing, you can run it there. It's very much simplified, but we are still just people using things like rolling updates or the simple things. Those were basically the same. So it was a very easy transition and it does everything what we want. So we have multiple instances connected with the same code base. So typical multi-tenant, multi-platform installations, and it works like a charm. So we just make a continuous delivery, continuous deployment update, and everything is fine. So we, I think since we utilized Mogenius, we never really had any form of WTF moment. What's going on here? Why is it not deploying? Something like that. I would say in the very beginning when we were setting it up, yeah, but not really.
Not even
right?
that. It just worked, and I knew, well, it didn't work, but I knew why. So I had configuration issues. And one point, it was further along in the workflow where pods didn't start and I didn't realize why. And then some minutes later, I realized I didn't have images for the pods. So the source was empty. So, okay, that's the reason. But otherwise, it was nice. The only thing where I had to go into anything that's not developer focused was the CLI for Helm. So I had to connect the Docker cluster to my machine, put on the Helm chart that Mogenius provided, and then after that, everything worked.
Yeah, that's how it's supposed to be. So it's good to hear that from you. Yeah, just some context on that. The operator that we run on the Kubernetes cluster is installed using a Helm chart. So that's one thing where you need direct access to the cluster, admin level access, install it. And then from there on, you can just hand it over to the team and feel free to use the UI. You aren't reading Kubernetes docs. You aren't using Kubernetes with your own hands, basically. Why did you go Kubernetes?
Jonathan, why you?
Yeah, that's a complicated question. The thing was in the old platform, we had everything. It worked. It was just complicated, and sometimes it didn't really work, and we didn't know why, but in total it worked. We had an uptime of over 99%, so it was fine. But each platform got more complicated, it got more expensive. We realized that the containers that we used, or the services, well, the resources per container that we used were getting more expensive and didn't really get faster. So at first we had shared CPUs, and then we switched to dedicated CPUs, and then we realized it didn't change much. So we went back to dedicated CPUs and we just used more. But every time we deployed something, it was strange that it worked on my machine, the typical phrase that every developer is saying, because it worked fine and it was fast. Even with little resources used on the machine, it was fast. And the solution that we used, it wasn't fast. And then later we realized it was the Google supervisor or gvisor, yeah. And our requests were scheduled in a strange way. And the way our work is running and file transfers and everything, it just halted everything to halt, but to almost a halt. And yeah, it got more complicated. And then we wanted to switch to Kubernetes. We didn't have the time to do it. And then finally we said, okay, let's do it now. We have to go online with new product. We have to move on from the old platform. And once we switched, well, it mostly a test with the first platform. I think the performance just got 10 times better. Everything so much faster. The reaction time were faster, everything. And we are using containers or pods as we were using before. It's just a redundancy thing now and not a scaling thing. So if we really want to scale, we just increase the nodes in the cluster. And we did that once. And even the transition was fine. I was a little hasty, so we had a downtime of, I think, 5 minutes. And it wasn't intended for that, but next time it will be faster or easier. And that's it. So it's just working fine and easy, and we have a constant control.
We have done that in a very weird state. So we basically used the old platform, and it was still running on the old platform, but the Kubernetes, which was running with Mogenius, was hosting some resources, which then was supporting the other platform, which was the reason why the old platform wasn't crashing, but the nodes were basically all at 100%, no matter what you do. They were basically just filled up, no matter how much space you give them. And so there were no space to up and down scale very much. And that led to problems and downtime. And well, we figured it out. And that was actually quite interesting to see how you can spread your pods across multiple platforms, which serve actually one other platform. Was interesting, but that was definitely not what we wanted to have. It was just a migration phase.
Yeah, but that's special in our case because our microservices, the way they are talking, it doesn't matter where they are. So you can host them on 10 different servers and locations as long as they have the same queue.
It was weird. It was very weird.
It worked.
Yeah.
I think for the whole change, we took less than a week to fully realize how everything worked, and we transitioned almost every platform that we have to Kubernetes now. We have, I think, 6 GitHub pipelines, and we could use more, but there's no need at the moment.
So from start to finish, how long did it take you to get launch in production on Kubernetes?
I think it took a little longer because we have special properties that we have to have. For example, the wildcard certificates, that took a little to finalize that. But if we didn't have that, I think it would just have taken a week at most. If I knew everything that I know now beforehand, I think we would have taken a day to transition everything. And maybe we would have done it on the weekend and the client wouldn't have realized that everything switched.
So you have done that. Like we were basically the largest enterprise client we had. You never told them that you made a migration.
Yeah. And
this was the last one we've done, of course.
Yeah, or it didn't have a downtime that affected them.
That was an interesting part. There was no downtime because 2 platforms at the same time. Then he was switching just the load balancer route, and then everything was working.
Yeah, that's supposed to work.
Yeah, in a way. And no one of us is a DevOps person, so it was nice.
For the people in the audience who understand the original meaning of DevOps, yes, we are, but we are not.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, we are not operating people in this way.
Not the German DevOps, right? Yeah, that's so. All in all, it was a very great thing to do. But to be honest, we were already container people. So we knew how container work, and we knew it very well, and we were orchestrating them for years already. So it's not like we didn't understood Kubernetes at all. It was like we understood what Kubernetes is, how it works, the idea behind it. The platform we have used is based on Kubernetes. It is just heavily abstracted to a point where you still can see that it's Kubernetes and you still see it's doing Kubernetes things, but you cannot really change it in a Kubernetes way. You change it on an abstraction level with the UI and YAML. And now it's pretty much the same for us, but in a way which is more meant to be like a good interface for a developer, but an ops person would be able to work well as well. And I think that is the strength of the platform, which unifies those two worlds, right? So it is not too focused on the developer like Vercel or those kind of things are, where you hope everything is right. And it's not too overcomplicated like Portainer or something like that, which is definitely just a UI for your orchestration, right? So it is a good middle ground in between. It basically catches everyone and helps you to fulfill your goals. And that is what we really like about that. Of course, the performance aspect comes from that we're using basically a managed Kubernetes cluster dedicated right now, and that really runs fast. And Mogenius it was very easy to put in. And we just saw that the level of ease you have put in or made available for us, that we basically can switch clusters as well. That gives us a good confidence as well, because in my streams, I'm always talking about the quality of agnosticism. And being agnostic with your software is extremely important. As soon as you tie yourself to a specific provider, you have an issue. So you cannot be 100% agnostic. That's not possible. So you are always bound to some technology or something like that, which you cannot just switch. But if you manage it correctly and you have the right tools at hand, and Mogenius is now a part of that for us, right? Then you have the freedom of choice. So do you need to change your cloud provider? Do you need to, maybe you need to go to or into on-premise? Or we had that as well, that other clients ask us, we want to have your software, but our instance needs to be hosted in our environment, that kind of things. So that could help us as well to just bring the agents there. So all the compute, all the databases can run somewhere else, but we still can manage the deployment processes, which is necessary. Those kind of things are only possible when you have a certain level of agnosticism and control. And that is what Mogenius really brings to us. Even though we call ourselves a startup, we are there now for 16 years already. We had just started a new product 3 years ago, which we defined as a new startup under a new umbrella. But the ideas behind are the same. And that's probably one of the reasons that we started with another or different mindset, not to be the very small company, try to avoid Kubernetes at all costs, just to have it easy in the beginning and be crippled later on. That is not what we want, because that is what I see all day long out there, very bad advice out there. I say that openly. This is what I think when I see that. You should plan for the next 5 to 10 years, because there are some things in software development which you cannot change easily, and that's the foundation. It is like building a house. You can't just change the foundation easily. It is very hard to do. Most companies are feature factories. You always react to some feedback of clients. The last thing you want to change is your underlying infrastructure, your frameworks, how you host things. And for example, if you wouldn't have been on containers right now already beforehand, it would be a different story to go to Kubernetes and scale. And it would be an impossible story with magic cloud providers. And that is something I just want to mention. And Mogenius is just a tool which helps a very small startup as well as a typical SMB or even higher company who is having, let's say, much higher requirements to how I host and how I develop things. The range you provide is awesome. Yeah.
I think that's a very interesting point that you make about the level of understanding about what to expect when introducing Kubernetes. You had a pretty deep understanding of what introducing Kubernetes to your team means in terms of new tooling, new knowledge that you need to build up, and a certain level of complexity that you introduce in your workflows. And I think that's a difference to many teams that haven't worked with Kubernetes actively before. We exaggerated in the beginning a little bit because I know that you've been testing Kubernetes for quite a while and you've been playing around with it a little bit. You haven't used it in production. And Other teams that were at this stage expected that because it says managed Kubernetes, it should just work and it's managed, right? What they didn't realize is that there's a large set of challenges that lies ahead of you once you have Kubernetes, and you anticipated that. And I think that made this a smooth transition because you made this choice for performance reasons, for reasons of control, for being cloud agnostic, because Kubernetes was built for in the end. And at the same time, you made a choice for a tool, luckily ours, that makes this transition and implementation easier so that you can leverage the power of Kubernetes.
Yeah, to that point that we already used that in the past, we dabbled with it. I think we ran one container just to check how it's working, if it's working, and then we didn't have time to continue. But it wasn't really that we seriously tried to use it. And that's the reason why it took so long. And
Right.
when we finally started, it was a 1 week thing where we really said, okay, now everything is there that we need. We prepared everything. Now we are starting. And that was a transition of less than a week, I would say. Yeah.
And what I wanted to add as well is quite a big portion of the last 16 years, I was more on the strategic level. So more thinking about things and others were executing it. I was partly executing, but not mainly. So I was a lot with clients, planning with them the projects we have done until today. And since that time on, so I would count myself more like the CTO, typical CTO in a small business. And that led us, I think, very early on to the idea to think ahead in time. And that is what we haven't mentioned yet so far in detail, is that Kubernetes is often seen out there as, oh, a very complex thing, you shouldn't use it. And then people come, use serverless. And it's the very same with React. People think, hey, React is the beginner's thing, right? Or serverless is the beginner's thing. If you are small, just start with those. That's a huge mistake because it's nice for your hobby project, right? You can start because you basically don't have the intention to actually make a real business. As soon as you make a real business, when there are investors, where there's money at stake, where stakeholders and people depending on that, you think twice or 3 times before you use serverless, or you use something you don't understand, like React, right? Because both serverless and React are very advanced patterns, and people treat it as the beginner's patterns, which is totally wrong. People don't realize it, and I don't know why, because most people talking about that are actually beginners or never had built something themselves over years. And the same with Kubernetes. Yes, Kubernetes is a complex technology, but you don't need to build Kubernetes. You need to use Kubernetes. That's the difference. And there are people like you from Mogenius who understood and perfectionized the idea of what platform engineering is and provide that as a PaaS solution or platform as a service solution for companies like ours who understand we have the need, but not the skills to set it up yourselves. So it would be maybe a different thing if you would have a third person, let's say in the founder ranks, who is more like leaning towards ops and is doing Kubernetes on a daily basis, but that is not what we have. The solution you have is more fitting into our long-term ideas of, hey, we need to have control. We actually think about NFRs. Most devs out there don't know what NFRs are, but those basically decide if you will make it or not with your solution over the next 5 years. It's not actually how good you can type or how good you can set up things. It is, have you planned out and laid out your plan for a longer period of time? And you basically always come to the idea of Kubernetes when you do something with containers. Well, the other way is the serverless aspect, but I really cannot recommend this because it is more like a hack, and it was never supposed, you said that, Kubernetes is supposed to scale agnostically in the cloud, while serverless was an invention of vendors to keep you inside their market offering, right? That's what serverless is about. And it's not really to help you with things, just that you can abstract something. You just need some weeks to understand. Compare that to the next 10 years, you should learn that.
Is this the main aspect why you chose? So thinking about serverless versus Kubernetes with the point of this proprietary technology or proprietary services of serverless products, is this the main driver why you would choose Kubernetes over serverless?
Yeah, I would say so, yes. So Kubernetes is when you make a sheet and you take a look at all the technologies available for the next 5 to 10 years, when you plan out your tech stack, your software, how you want to deliver things, then you will inevitably come to some conclusions and qualities you need to have. And you will quickly see that Kubernetes can do all of them, but it does have an overhead in complexity, these kind of things, maybe costs in the beginning. That's another aspect. So in the very first week, Kubernetes is more expensive than running serverless, but it will change pretty quickly when you are into the game, because on some point in time, Kubernetes stays where it is, a little bit of auto-scaling capabilities and linear scaling, but it's not like scaling in complexity later on when you need to implement new complexity layers in your application. You have other systems, then you have those funny functions. You want to keep the functions instead of cold starts and these kind of things, where as soon as you get to this point, you should have taken Kubernetes, please, or at least Docker Swarm, but not service, because hot functions are the most stupid thing you can do, right? So it's like you want to have cold functions, then you make them hot just to prevent containers, which are exactly doing that, but more stable and better. That doesn't make sense at all. And so the scaling aspect is wrong as well. You can scale as well as you do on both sides, right? So it's not like with Kubernetes, you cannot scale like that. It's just that people with serverless, they say it's easier to scale on edge. It's easier, but it's not impossible to do the same with Kubernetes. That's the point. And so if you have a complex planning for the next years, you plan a real solution, a real business, may it be a lifestyle business or may it be a business where venture capitalists invests into. You need to have something solid. In 3 years from now, ops should not be your problem. That's the reason why we go with Kubernetes, because that is a better proven technology no matter what. And there is a ceiling of complexity. It won't get more complex with the scale of your application, while serverless is always as complex as your solution is. And that's an issue.
I think the huge advantage with Kubernetes is also that there's an ecosystem actively developing this independently from certain providers, whereas the serverless products, they are developed by hyperscalers and just by them. I think we will see that serverless will become the less favorable solution, especially for the workloads it was designed for. I think it originated from companies that wasted money on workloads that were running even if they weren't receiving traffic. I only have a traffic peak at 5 p.m. each day, so I just want to keep the container up for that time. This is where serverless shined. But we will see this also being implemented in the way that scheduling is being developed with Kubernetes. The Google Cloud Platform is huge advancements in this area where you have smart scheduling of pools and smart resource dimensions. These kind of things are what people actually missed and why they went serverless, in my opinion, in the last years. Kubernetes will evolve in a way that it will cater to these requirements for companies that have very individual traffic peaks and load requirements at certain times of the day. And Kubernetes will take care of that. Your cluster will just scale dynamically, or you do it based on scheduled pods and jobs and what feature you would use in Kubernetes itself.
Yeah, but most people, so the serverless space started with AWS to become big, but people pretty quickly talked about it in a context of something like Next.js, which was the most prominent thing on social media when it comes to software development. There were shop front ends built for Shopify with Next.js, and they put it on Vercel to scale it with serverless. And the point is, those are extremely simple applications. I don't want to blame anyone who's working on those. They are important, but those are not real like big web applications. So we have a handful of routes we have on the server side, which are basically connecting to a pre-existing backend system, which is Shopify, Magento, or whatever system you use there. So it's basically a headless procedure. So you have more like you build a proxy version of something and not really your own backend. As soon as you build something big yourself, which is normally the stuff which scales or needs to scale in form of business value as well, then you get to the point where you have what you just said. You will have services generating things, and you will have services just proxying things. So, for example, we have several functions. We came from the web to print space originally, so we generate a lot of things. And you simply cannot generate large PDFs with serverless without getting a headache. It's becoming something very, very unfunny. When you work with very large AI things right now, you will get problems with serverless as well, because you have limitations which are basically lower barriers than you actually have in the AI space. So you can't just make a 200 seconds call simply with serverless. It will run into issues on some point in time, or the load or the payload as well, when you do PDFs or something like that. When you have that serious development of applications, you need to have that fine-grained control over things. Otherwise, it will become hard to scale. And the last thing is, after 2 or 3 years of realizing this, and then saying, oh, maybe we can then switch to Kubernetes is a very bad idea, because you are so bound into the idea of, hey, we have set up everything in a serverless way that you really cannot, because you think in functions there. That's one of this issue. You don't think in services. And that's one of the reasons why many people probably say you shouldn't go with some idea like microservices. We went with microservices and we are very happy with that. People think like, oh, you have as many microservices as functions in serverless. That's nonsense. So you can just run an application with 2 or 3 microservices and just have a very good context boundary idea behind that. And then everything works out. And you really can use Kubernetes ideally then to really provide for specific services, specific resources. And you really have that fine-grained control you need. And the last thing you need to worry about then is how to actually make that in the future, because it will always work. That's one of the fine things that I really like.
I mean, if you would have a new requirement in the future for another infrastructure and you would have been on serverless, you could basically rewrite your whole stack. But if a customer tomorrow says, I want you to run your software on my own Kubernetes cluster, you could just say, okay, give me a cluster and we'll deploy tomorrow. So I think that's now the huge difference that you have.
Yes. It's not like, I don't want to do serverless bashing. I sound like a person who's do serverless bashing.
That's okay.
Or maybe I want to. I don't know. So it's like, I don't see the real value of it other than you can start quick and fail early. That's what you actually do. But most companies anyway, failing early. So probably it doesn't really count into play. But I think the problem is people try to avoid barriers in the beginning. And too many people try to build things fast in the beginning instead of planning out what they actually want to do. And we came from the original spaces, Windows, servers, IIS, Apache, PHP, LAMP stacks, those kind of things, were the pain in the past of us, right? And in having Nginx proxies in between 3 or 4 instances of these kind of things, that was horrible, right? But one thing is to say about Windows IIS, it was running for 15 years. It's still running today. We have still running applications running on that. There are no flaws and no issues once it was set up. The same qualities are going towards or applying to Kubernetes, but not to serverless. Serverless has changed so often, even in the providers we used it from time to time, that it was actually a horrible thing. And it is for me not a very stable solution at all, and is very non-agnostic. It's very biased. It's not even opinionated. I would call it biased, because it's so dedicated to one specific provider that basically in every coaching, every mentor thing, everything I was going through with other coaches, these kind of things, is that people say, okay, most scenarios we have is helping me CTO going through the journey away from AWS serverless towards basically Google Kubernetes cluster, something like that. So that's one thing they want to do. And it is always on this stage where they actually want to grow, but then they see, oh, I'm stuck. So we need to, but actually this entire stream is not about bashing that one. But I just saw that too often that I need to speak up about that. Just my personal opinion. But Jonathan, so you are now working actively with Nest.js, so primarily server-side JavaScript. You're working with microservices. How do you feel as a follow-up of last session where we were talking about in detail how you structure that? How do you feel with your solution landscape you have built on Kubernetes together with Mogenius? How does it feel together or come together?
It's in a way a perfect fit, I think, because it's just, we always thought in Docker containers, and since everything is each Docker container is a microservice, so they are built in a way that multiple can work next to each other, so we can have replicas, we can scale everything, and that's exactly what Kubernetes is doing. Well, we were using the Kubernetes idea before we knew we wanted to use Kubernetes in a way. So it's a perfect fit, and we can scale, we can see everything. I don't know. I don't have any issues at the moment. The only question would be, do we want to have more microservices? At the moment, what can we separate into a new microservice? But that's really a future thing.
Did you change things on your application when transitioning to Kubernetes?
No, I think the only thing that we had to prepare beforehand was we changed our health routes to health Z, and that's all. So we added a new route for health checks. And
what changed a bit was our applications provide the ability that you can define your own top level and sub level domains. You can bring your own domain and use existing domains of ours as subdomains. And there is a process in between which automates that. And that was quite different because we were switching to a load balancer. That's what Jonathan in the beginning was referring to, the wildcard certificate, which wasn't necessary beforehand because the PaaS provider was doing that. And now we need to do that ourselves in a combination of a load balancer and an Nginx implementation. So it was not really affecting the code base. It was more like, since we use a monorepository, it was the infrastructure as code aspects were changing how traffic is routed ingress and egress, actually.
The ingress, we added a new proxy. That's the only thing that we really changed because the old platform was providing that. So in fact, the old platform is you have a proxy that you can configure and everything else is your container. And now we just have to provide our own proxy. But in a way, it's nice to have control over that as well. So we can configure it and it's as simply as it needs to be, and it just works. I think the configuration is built by a shell script, and it's not even a real file that we change. We have 5 variables, environment variables that we pass on, and everything works. So that's the only thing that we really had to change.
Yeah, the equivalent here is the proxy of the managed container platform is the ingress controller in Kubernetes that you're now leveraging. And that's probably the main point where I remember that we had deeper conversations about how should we actually transition to the new hostname setup and how to manage certificates. And I think that we are still in progress here to improve that. So there's a lot of potential because as with every feature in Kubernetes, you have 50 ways of solving a certain problem. And so we just have to choose the right one and then make that scale.
What I liked was that in the very beginning, not in the very beginning, but when we really started to migrate, we had several ideas or brought several ideas in because our application is doing things in specific ways to scale in terms of platform and tenants. So it's a multi-tenant scaling application in multiple segments. So yeah, it's a little bit complicated for the company size we are, but that's from the nature of serving enterprises and small clients. And what we really liked was how you reacted to those kind of things. So because there were edge cases which weren't covered, which are not, let's say, industry standard, but you were actually helping us there so quickly and implemented that even in the next release, what we needed, that it felt for us like a smooth transition. So before we actually got to the point when we were ready, so we were never really waiting for you. It was like we always had things to do ourselves anyway. And you were so fast. And so that the idea of continuous delivery, which I like so much, so I'm a signer of the minimal viable CD side, for example, that is what you do as well. And that is what I really want to point out right now. It is extremely valuable to work with you because you are approachable, not just as a person, but in this entire company. And if you have specific needs and problems, you jump in to solve them. And that is, let's say, something which really helps companies who have challenges themselves and need someone to solve these problems while not having ops people themselves. So that is a big plus working together with Mogenius. I just wanted to point out.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's one of the main challenges that we do, because providing a PaaS solution on Kubernetes means that you need to have an opinionated view on how to expose certain features of Kubernetes and how to integrate that in a way that's to a certain level abstracted, that's easy to use, that has defaults. And using defaults means you need to throw away stuff. And this is exactly where you ran into what you call edge case, where we saw there's a certain layer missing here where people want to have control. In this example, about defining the certificate for issuing TLS here. So a very, very specific challenge where we are now really sweating about how we can integrate this without just adding a dumb feature that could have been a line in a file, right? Because it's usually more than that. Kubernetes is just a line in a file, but integrated that in a UI in a smart way means that we really need to think about the user experience here. So that's basically all we do for the platform.
Jonathan, anything to add?
No, I don't think so. I said everything. I'm just happy.
Everything is said. Jan, do you have anything?
If Jonathan is happy, then I am happy. And
okay, we're all happy.
We really appreciate your positive feedback about everything.
No, it was an interesting journey. We had several routes now speeding up that much. that we were basically waiting sometimes for 20 seconds until the PDF was created. And now we basically have that in a second or two or something like that. Of course, that is mainly because of the compute power of the cluster, but you made it possible for us as a company to still focus on what's important, which is the value we create with our software for our clients, and not figuring out how we actually bring that software to the clients, right? So the infrastructure idea, the pipelining idea, how all the things come together. Of course, we could spend time and find it out ourselves. And we are experienced enough to would have find a way ourselves. The question is, do we want to do that? Do we want to reinvent wheels in a way which we cannot monetize at all? No, it doesn't. So everyone who's hearing this, it's very important to understand it's not just because you can do something, you should. That's the reason why software developers should never set up printers for family members. That's not our job, right? This is IT admin stuff. That's not developer stuff. So even though we can do that, doesn't mean we should do that. And that's one of the reasons why I think that's the core message, that Mogenius is providing a platform. It's basically our external platform team for what we do. And they have proven that even, as I said, even our very specific edge cases were covered. This is what you expect of a platform team, and they have delivered. So I can, from my side, only recommend Jan and his team if you are taking a look into something solid to run your application on in the future. That's what I can say about that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Cool. Then I would say we wrap up. We are 1 hour in. Thank you very much for joining us, Jan. Thanks, Jonathan. And see you next time, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks a lot.